This is the last of the summer program lecture from me. I've done this is the sixth one. And I'll tell you in a few minutes what is the topics that we're going to cover. And generally speaking, it's about China. And China, of course, is going to be a very prominent player in our life soon. That's why we talk so much about China. And what are we going to talk about today? Here is the agenda. I'll do my normal recap as I normally do, which is to provide the context to what is the talk about. And of course, in terms of broad sort of picture of the world, the international scene. And then we'll look at China's global economic position. Because see, nowadays, as we have said before, it's not the gunboat diplomacy that is in action. It's more economic trade wars and that sort of thing that is in action. And therefore, we need to be able to recognize where we stand on this and where countries stand on this. And China's position economically is quite strong, and it's developing at a very fast rate, and soon we'll be catching up USA. We'll see some of these figures as we go along. Now, we are also going to talk about a little about the factors that have contributed to China's rise. I've talked before on various sort of my earlier talks, which we have covered, some of the factors that have contributed to China's growth, especially in the last 40, 50 years. And what we're going to talk today is just really the broad things. This is something that I picked up from the Financial Times clip that I saw. And the editor, based in Hong Kong, is a very close observer of China. And he has, along with his colleague, have very interesting views on China. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll look at the trade patterns, because as we said, the economy is dependent on trade globally. And then we can understand a bit better by seeing how it is positioned, globally, in terms of not only just itself, but relative to other countries. So we look at that. And then, of course, we'll look very quickly at some of the projects that China is undertaking in Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but again, my previous talks have addressed individually each of these areas. So for more detail, you can go there into the archive. But today, we're just going to sort of have a very quick, overview. And then, of course, the G7. The G7, of course, took place a couple of months back, I think. And they're trying to figure out how to best respond to the changing circumstances in the world, especially post-pandemic. So with that, let's do my recap. Now, recap has to do basically with the current situation prevailing at the moment in terms of politics, in terms of geopolitics as well, I suppose. And the big events that have happened this past week is Afghanistan. And the big countries around it are very much affected with the US pullout and Taliban coming in. Afghanistan has achieved what it was trying to achieve 20 years ago from the perspective of Taliban. And now we'll have to see how the situation develops over there. So a lot of powers around Afghanistan, that's included, the most prominent one is, of course, Pakistan. And then there's Iran and China, and then all the Central Asian republics, and also Russia and Turkey. Of course, not to mention the NATO countries and USA. But they are sort of receding a bit in the background. And the people who are coming forward are the countries I mentioned earlier, those that are in Asia. So why is that important from our perspective of the talk today? Because one of the big players, of course, is China. And what China is doing vis-a-vis Afghanistan is very important. They, along with the countries around them, are calling for a peaceful transfer, or inclusive government rather, that would be representative. I'm not sure how achievable that is. But just this morning, I heard there is a area called Panjshir, and there is a sort of a rebellious type of tribal group which is starting to fight back the Taliban, and they're being backed by India, USA, and NATO, and all those countries. So there is a proxy war, as it were, going to be starting. But my view on this is that it's again to be of no avail, because military solutions are never going to be solutions for that region. So again, it will be a very wrong step for anybody to go that way. Okay, having said that, let me then just go into this China talk that I'm going to be covering today. Okay, will China become the economic center of the world? Now, this is something which is a very important question to ask, because you remember when the Berlin Wall came down and windows came, the globalization started to take place, and the WTO gave entry to China in the early 90s. Immediately, we injected about 900 million people into the world's economy. And that 900 million people represented China. And they have, in fact, basically came in with low costs that attracted a lot of foreign companies to come in and start manufacturing in China. So that led to a huge growth in China taking place. Okay, China is sort of, making good progress from the point of view of their economy. They've got about more than about three quarters of the world's US's GDP at the moment, about 14, 15 trillion, I think, compared to US's 20 trillion, 21 trillion. So they are becoming a fairly sort of big power. And what has been their growth? If you look at the GDP growth over the last few years, the average has been of the order of about 8 to 9%, which is, phenomenal growth. This is the growth here. This is the line of 9%. So you can see it is, even as it. So what happens is usually when countries develop, as are the European countries and USA, they can't really sort of muster up a 9% growth, even 6 or 7% growth. It is the early phases of countries which are developing. They can, clock up fairly large growths, annual growths, but the richer countries can't. In the case of China, they have come to the point now of a middle income country, and their growths are now going to be slowing down. The same thing, I think, could be said about other countries which have got a large middle class in their countries. So now this is an interesting sort of graph. Now, the way, if you look at the background here, this is Europe, this is Asia, and over here is America, USA. It's very faint, but what this is showing is over the last 1,000 years, if you like, the economic power, economic centers have moved over. So in the year 1000, I suppose, AD, it was there very much in Asia and Middle East. Then 1500 still in Asia, 1800 Asia, and then started to move to Europe in the 20th century, 1913 over here. And then it started to move across to USA in the 1950s, just after the Second World War, and then started to recede back. And then, of course, comes back to Asia again, which is China here. So you can see the economic power has shifted over the centuries to one region of the world or another. And it started off here in Asia, and now it's coming back to Asia. So it's an interesting sort of point to remember that things are not the same, they're shifting quite a bit. Okay, now, what is the strategy that China has? Because we asked the question, is it going to become the economic center of the world? And China's strategy to make its economy Sinocentric. By that, what I mean is that they want a lot of the activity to be linked to China. So it's a conscious strategy amongst the policymakers here, Chinese policy, to make the world more Sino-centric. And what does that actually give China? Well, it gives them, the standard setting processes. Because as you know, when you come up with new products, they have an advantage. Any company that comes up with a new product, and if it's the first time ever anywhere, then they more or less set the standard. And then others who come in, then they follow that standard. So that standard setting is a good sort of advantage for a country to have in order to sort of, take the lead in the products that they make and develop them, as they go along. So here we're trying to ensure that the latest technologies around the world are at least partly or largely dependent on Chinese technologies. That's what they mean by really Sino-centric. So the intention is there to be a unique global center, but there's always a but. The big question, though, is whether the rest of the world is going to play ball and let that happen. Now, that's a very interesting question, because any country is not working in a vacuum. And what happens is that they have to deal with other countries. Some of them are friendly, some of them are not. Some of them are competitively sort of your opponents, some are antagonistically or promote for political reasons or whatever other reasons. So it's not a fair world, let me put it that way. So what we have is blocks forming, and the blocks then vie with each other for power, and they influence the smaller countries enormously. And that, you see, is what's happening in Afghanistan at the moment. Afghan, a really poor country, for centuries has been poor. And the wars have been fought over there. And the blocks that are fighting the war are, of course, US has been there for 20 years, along with NATO. And of course, Taliban are the local people. They've been fighting. They've been supported by some other powers around the neighboring countries with a bit of help, but not of too much. But nevertheless, what is happening is proxy wars going on, and some of the bigger powers get embroiled in it. And that's why I say it's not a straight path for development. There are all sorts of countervailing forces that take place, and somebody's interests are there. Big money's interests are there, big power interests are there. Therefore, one has got to navigate the developmental process, very carefully. And that's why China is now in a position to not just be told what to do, but they're going to say, well, we are going to go and do this thing in our way. And they're strong enough to be able to sort of ward off any pressure that they might be coming under. So here we are. Let's see. The world will always try to sort of, if it's not your friend, they'll try and sort of put obstacles in the way. Okay, how did China do this rather phenomenal growth only in the last 30, 40 years? Here we can see the PPP, I again mentioned it, I think last time when I was talking about the domestic context. That's the purchasing power parity, which is the amount of purchasing power you have in the country for a dollar, if you like. Just measuring the dollar, which is the product of a country, if you like, to measure the GDP, doesn't necessarily mean for a dollar you buy the same thing in different countries. So this PPP is a measure of how much more you can buy than with just the figures of GDP that are mentioned relative to each country. So here we are. China's real GDP is something here. See, about 15 trillion. But the purchasing power parity is up here, which is 25 trillion, which is more than USA's. So in terms of PPP, China has already, taken the lead. Okay, how does this spectacular growth, it astounded the world. So it developed at an extraordinary rate. We said from 7 to 8 to 9% annually. And of course, what we are seeing is that because of this phenomenal growth, the rest of the world is starting to get worried. They're saying, oh, we better watch it. and we can't sort of let this sort of have a free, as it were, free pass for China to grow unhindered. So there's going to be some sharp policies being developed. And that's one of the things that G7, when they last met here a few months ago, started to talk about. So here we are, the goal is starting to somewhat fragment. Now, one of the things about the global economy is not one monolithic block. There are supply chains of various sorts that have been sort of sourced from various countries. And therefore, it is well integrated, if you like, internationally. So to pry them apart is not easy. So when Trump talks about, say, building walls and trade walls and all that, you can't extract the economy so easily. We'll have to see how we are set up. And I'll show you sort of a diagram for that. Okay, well, that's a bit later coming up, but here, these are the turning points in China's growth. What are the big things that impacted China? Here, I think I'll just make this a little bit bigger. Okay. Now, the first thing is after Mao, this was in the mid-70s, Deng Xiaoping, you know that he's the one who brought in a little bit of free market into China, which meant that they opened up to capitalistic notions of investment in China and not just the socialist, which was up to that point the Mao's policy. So Deng Xiaoping, he brought in modernization, and that meant that huge amounts of people were brought in from the farming agriculture into the cities to start manufacturing. And that's what happened when it became the WTO in the 1990s here. And the stock exchange started to do well. And of course, foreign investment started to pour into China because of low costs over there. And also, the other thing is that it's a big market. So the two things are going for China. So the foreign companies, came in a big way, because by investing in there, they could sort of produce cheaper goods, and they can bring those goods across to the West, to the richer countries, and make big profits and so on. Anyway, China joins the WTO here, about 2000, and then it's spectacular sort of growth here, taking place. Okay, what is the middle income trap? You see, so long as the country is poor, the wages are low, and companies come in and they start producing, and they give them some wages, and they prosper. And as they prosper, the income levels go up. And then a lot of them are out of poverty, and then they come into the middle income. And when they come into the middle income, then from that point on to the higher income is a lot harder, which is what I think China is going to be facing right now. But in order to counter that, what it's doing is it's farming out, outsourcing a lot of its production to Vietnam and maybe soon to Pakistan and to other sort of ASEAN countries in Asia. Now, this is the purchase. This is just telling us, China is not really a rich country. If you look at the standard of living of the people, they are coming up, there's middle income. But if you look at their individual incomes, they're low compared to the West. And this is where they are. If you look at this graph here, see, China is red. This is per head of purchasing power. So they are very low here. See, the purchasing power is low. And this one here is India. India is below China. And then the European and the West countries are up here because they are richer countries and they have higher incomes. So in that regard, China is still, if you like, a poor country, but it has in fact brought about changes which are accelerating the lower classes to participate in the new economy by bringing in this digitalization and so on. I remember I talked to you about that earlier on. So the consumer spending is catching up. If you see here, the consumer spending of the individual Chinese was low because they earned low. This is Japan over here. It's been always high. And now China has started to overtake that in terms of spending by the community, by the retail business. Okay, one of the things that is causing the growth of the Chinese economy is its innovative sort of way of tackling the issues that they face. And by that, I mean they're bringing in innovation, and that innovation has relied a lot on technology. And they are spending a lot of money on R&D and also investing in startups of one sort or another, encouraging people to come in. So that technological prowess is sort of paying huge dividends. And what are the areas that are sort of bringing about these high dividends? Here you can look at that. This is the wind power, investment in wind power, because as we know, China is highly polluting because of coal energy that it uses. Coal power stations, one coal power, I think, every month. But they are going to move out of it because, it's causing pollution in the cities and so on. So they're going to rely a lot on this wind power and solar power. Then they're going in for the digital economy, online payments and so on. We talked about that last time. Because they got these super apps, Alibaba and WeChat and so on. The super apps enable you to sort of carry out all the needs of your requirements, like for instance, shopping, making transfers of payments, booking seats for the opera, or whatever it may be. So a lot of activities getting online at the moment, such activities. So here we are. They're also starting this digital currency. I remember I mentioned to you last time, they have gone in for a digital yuan or RMB. That's the local currency and foreign currency. Now, the Fed is also looking at to see if they can make a digital dollar. They're still behind, but sooner or later they'll be having that. Then, of course, AI is very much something that they're very good at, and they're starting to make headway there. And then you have here the quantum computers. I haven't talked much about quantum computers, but these are computers that are at the atomic level, where the electron and the protons actually form the bits. So the position of the electrons in an atom will determine whether it's a 0 or a 1. So it's a hugely powerful way. It hasn't come into, if you like, into any big production, but they are working on it. It's still experimental, and it's going to have enormous impact, especially on big sort of projects like, weather prediction or simulation for that matter. That requires immense power to do that because, it's such a big question, that weather. Then you've got the satellites. They're putting up satellites, by the in number. In fact, they're moving on to something called 6G, which is a move up from 5G. We are still in 4G, so you can see they're sort of really getting far ahead. That's 5G here. They're all very much into that in many cities already. Then you've got these drones. Now, drones are not just for war machines. Drones can be used for all sorts of information, collecting agriculture information, wild areas, forestation, incredible amount of facility there. But the only times we hear in our media about drones is when the war, they go and shoot down things and so on, which is really, not necessarily the right application all the time for drones. And this high power, ultra high power. When you transmit power from one point to another, there are two things in power transmission. One is called the amperage and the other one's voltage. Now you can vary these two. If you increase the voltage, then you reduce the amperage, which means that the power loss over the line is minimal. So if you increase the voltage to a very high number, then you can transmit with very little power loss over the line to vast distances. Anyway, that's very briefly, the technological areas which they are sort of very much ahead in. Okay, now how are they going to be conducting this trade that they, have so much, links with the world, and they've got various mechanisms to do that. Now, traditionally, there has been the big hubs, the Germany, China, and USA are the three hubs that we are aware of. Now, this is Germany, a big manufacturing country in Europe. China is a big one in Asia, and the USA, of course, here. Now, these hubs have little countries around them that tie into these hubs to supply their needs and so on, to buy their goods and supply their needs as well. But of course, they go outside these countries themselves as well. But these are the, if you like, the immediate ones that do a lot of business with. Like here in USA, it's Canada and Mexico. They are the big sort of partners of USA in development, in doing all sorts of things in manufacturing. Okay, this is basically saying that there are three hubs, that is Germany, China, and USA. It's a complex relationship because I told you earlier on, this globalization is very intricate. Supply chains are all over the place. They're sort of, interlinked very heavily. And they call them the global value chains because, you order something, maybe if it's just even a piece of machinery, whatever it may be, then it's sourced by so many different places and somebody puts it all together. And each one then collects their own little fee by adding value to it and until the whole product is completed. So now what is happening is that although it has been regional, it probably will become, it's deepening the trade between itself because people are becoming politically sensitive as to where that stuff comes from. So they want to depend on, let's say, for instance, UK. UK wants to sort of source things from Europe, maybe as much, because they can rely more on that. So here it says also China would be also China doesn't want to give up its big markets that it has, which is the US and Europe. So they have to have a trade-off between the markets that they can sell and where they can source their products from and get the supply chains working for them. Okay, this is another picture of the same thing. This is a bit more intensification of that three hubs. You can see even the red ones have their own sourcing points here. So a bit more regional emphasis here. Regional emphasis. That's the way the world is going towards. That's what it's saying here. So more regional activity. And basically, it covers services and trade. And of course, it also sort of brings in the political factor because a lot of companies are not too keen to do business with China because they feel that Chinese government has too big a say in the policies and therefore they're a bit reluctant. But where the coast is clear, they go in very quickly. Like even Tesla. Tesla has gone and built a factory in Shanghai to make electric cars. And they went in there on the condition that Chinese government, which normally adds a little caveat when you go and do business in China, to say, okay, you need to have a local partner. So in the case of Tesla, they said, no, we don't want a local partner. We'll bring it ourselves and we'll export and sell it to the domestic market. And because it is a very high-tech company, Chinese government said, okay, fine, you can do that. Which means it has good business because, it's a new business, electric cars, and they'll be exporting it and using their the manpower in China to help do that. So it's not going to be a homogeneous global economy, as you can see. It's going to be much more regional because of the politics behind the trade as well. Okay, quickly moving on to this one. Yeah, okay, let's skip that one. Now, trade patterns. If you look at 20 years ago, all this blue is where all the US dependent companies and linked to USA were calling the shots, if you like. And China is this red one. Just a few countries here in Africa and of course here in a few in Asia. But come 2019, you see how much the blue becomes red. So 20 years later, it is China which is really sort of sourcing a lot of the products that are needed in Asia, Africa, and South America, and even Australia. And of course, countries that are not being so heavily as the rest of the world is Canada, USA, and Mexico, and a couple of countries here in Africa. Okay, now this is the big dilemma for the G7. As you can see, this picture is rather sort of interesting because each one is looking in a different way, which means I don't think they're going to come through with a single policy. I mean, the one policy that I heard, which was enunciated by Biden here, was that they're going to do a parallel Belt and Road Initiative type of infrastructure for the world. Now, and he said they're going to spend 40 trillion. Now, this is a figure pulled out of the air, and they're 15 years behind China. So I think that sort of statement by the G7 that has got to be taken with a pinch of salt, I think. Okay, this is again talking about tech leaders. Which are the areas that they are going to be, looking at to see whether they can maintain the edge? It's like in this wind and solar power. And then we went through that earlier on. It's the same lot, the digital currencies, AI, satellite, space. Okay, so we've covered that before. Okay, now how are they going to actually implement it on the ground? They're going to implement it by building infrastructure in these 135 countries in the world. And that's that BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. And here's the sort of, the whole infrastructure. You could say that these are the rail links over land, and over the sea, the blue one, as you can see, are the ports and the sea lanes. And these are the roads and the highways and the trains. And so you can see this is how they're going to deliver their growth. And if you like, becoming Sinocentric and also improving the economy. Now, this is where all the 135 countries are based. You can see it's 3/4 of the world, as it were, here. Yeah, this is coming to Europe here. Rotterdam and Duisburg, some place in Germany. Yeah, and also Belarus. Belarus is here, and they're going to build a huge, they've already started building this huge industrial parks, if you like, to produce the goods and supply them to Europe and to also export them to other regions of Asia. And the links to China are there. You can see that. So you can see how well they plan this whole, they have these 5-year plans, and they keep tweaking those plans if need be, but they follow it, generally speaking. So one knows what is going to be happening in the next 5 or 10 years and even 15 years. So you can see, a big sort of concerted effort in bringing about, if you like, the delivery of their vision. Okay, this is Germany. They're sort of linking up through this trains here. This is the map here. You can look at your own time. And of course, one thing I told you, remember in the last, they've got these rail track trains, which can switch the gauge, which means that you don't have to transfer the load from one train to another train. You just make the wheels a bit narrower or wider. And that technology is there. So they are able to send goods right from, say, China on one train right up to Victoria, maybe, or in Germany, of course, on the way, and have that without unloading the goods, because they'll adjust to the rail of different countries. So Germany is closer than USA, of course, and then even closer than many other countries in Europe, because Germany relies on doing good business with China. as it's also thinking of doing business with Russia. So it's not held back all the time by political concerns to a large extent. If it sees its advantages economically for its economy, then it's going to make a deal which is going to be a win-win for both of them. Okay, and of course, because they're working closely with China and Germany, and because Germany is, a very good university towns all over in the country, in the same way UK and USA. So that is why a lot of Chinese students, they come in thousands actually to these advanced countries and attend the universities, and they go back, well educated. Here, this is the Regional Cooperative Economic Pact. This has got so many countries. This is actually came about, as I told you in one of my earlier talks, as a TPP, the Trans-Pacific Pact, which Obama set up, which both Hillary and Trump got rid of. And as soon as they got rid of that, China stepped in and made it into an RCEP and included all these countries. And it's the biggest trading bloc in the world at the moment. Now, at the moment, China is focusing on, as I said, in that Belt and Road, we saw a lot of those arms emanating from China. One is going towards Southeast Asia, that's the ASEAN region. And these are the countries that are covered. Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand, the whole lot down south. In fact, I did sort of cover a little bit of that in the earlier talk when I talked about China and the Southeast Asia. And one thing I think may be worthy of note as well is that a lot of these countries in this part of the world, their rivers emanate from China, from Tibet, in fact. And that's interesting because, every country is dependent on water. And because this water is coming from China, China has a bit of leverage on that. Now, these are things that all these countries are putting in, rail links and then ports. Here are the ports, and then, of course, shipping lanes. And they call it the new, I'm going to rush through this because this is old stuff. And here they are making deals worth several billion, and this is with Indonesia. Yeah, this is Indonesia. And this gives you an idea of how they are tying up Africa and South America. And I told you, in exchange, what they, for all the technology and the infrastructure that China produces or gives to these countries, they get paid back with the oil, base metals, cotton, and soya. So you can see from the colors, which country, oops, what's happened there? Okay. Which country is selling what to China, making payment to China in lieu of the services that China is giving them. Okay, this is quite a lot, and this is a timeline of how they came in and started to do all these projects. You can look at that and you can see some of these countries here that are part of China. Okay, and there's a lot of that in China and Africa. I'm going to whiz through that because it's just pictures I want you to see. Africa also is interest to China because they've got cheap labor and plenty of resources. So China is very keen to put in the infrastructure to bring over the resources and then create factories in these little places and utilize the labor. Yeah. So infrastructure, this is basically saying what I just said. Okay, one of the things about how else they have been getting the influence across to these poorer countries is that in Africa, if you look at this picture, there are 35 countries Africa that were in the US orbit in 1971. And that orbit meant that these countries had to recognize Taiwan as China and not the People's Republic of China, not the mainland China. But now what has happened is this picture here. Very few countries now recognize Taiwan as China, And therefore, China has really won over these countries to say, look, we are the People's Republic of China. Taiwan is not. Although Taiwan is part of China, but Taiwan, as USA used to say, that is the real China, but it's not. That's their particular sort of, so they've gained quite a lot of countries in Africa. Yeah, these are all the projects that they're doing, various numbers of projects, refineries and all sorts of building projects. I put them up so that it will be a record for you so that when you get your time, you can look at them. And of course, barter is the way they're doing it because they don't have too much money. They give them their resources. Yeah, this is again railways in Nigeria, in Tanzania, ports, South Africa, all sorts of building parks and so on, Kenya railways, hydro dams in Guinea, in Congo, tons of copper for China, Chad, the railway links, Mozambique, hydro dams, and so on and so on. It goes on. So let me just not dwell on that. They also have a type of base, which is in Djibouti. You see all these countries, China has only one foreign base. And USA has 800 bases. But China says, well, I'm going to have a base here in Africa as well. This is where they have in Djibouti, where all the other countries also have their bases. Why? Because this is such an important crossing here, from the Gulf. It connects the Mediterranean and the Gulf to Indian Ocean and to the Pacific. So they have those sort of consideration as well. Okay, I'm going to stop here because we've already done 40 minutes of it. Let me then go on to do it. Okay, sorry for having rushed through that. But then there you are. Time is always there. And we need to be able to get over that. So you can unmute.
I think their imperialism is just economic, or are they wanting political power?
Well, I think the political power, I think, is secondary for China because they are concerned more about providing the economic well-being. As we can see in their own country, they have uplifted 800 million people from poverty up, to a better way of life. So when they want to do the same formula for other countries, they're not asking what type of political system they have. What they ask of these countries is that, look, we are going to give you a means of bettering your economic circumstances, and you make us this payment. So it's more of a transactional rather than a political game. But of course, when you have such close ties to any country, the politics always comes in, but that is not the real aim of China. I don't think, because they have seen what imperialism led to for Britain, it had to leave these countries sooner or later. So that is not really the model that they want to pursue. And also, if you look at USA, because when Britain imperialist days were over, USA stepped in and did the economic, if you like, imperialism, which is what we see today. So again, based on a model which is different from the Chinese model. The Chinese model say, we want to make the lives of the people better. In the case of the US model, we are talking about a capital bank going in or a big company going in and making big bucks out of whatever that market, local market may be, and a trickle-down economic impact being given. So you can see there's a bit difference between the approaches of the past, if you like, models to the current one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It's been an amazing gallop through an enormous field, and I will watch it again on your archive because I think there was just a bit too much for most people to take in. I don't know whether I'm speaking for everybody, but I am certainly speaking for myself. But Thank you very, very much. It's been terrific.
Yeah, I think the idea is not so much to sort of follow word by word and line by line,
no.
but rather to get a general sense,
Yeah,
which a lot of people are not aware of, you see.
absolutely.
And therefore, I think you're way ahead of most people when you are able to at least sort of have this type of information come across you,
Yeah.
which enables you to be at least, look at it much more holistically.
Yes.
Yeah.
The problem is, even if we do look at it holistically, and there's bugger all we can do about it.
Well, this is quite important, you see, because first of all, the first step towards anything, as they say, the first step is awareness.
Yeah.
The moment you are aware, then your subsequent actions will then sort of, follow through.
You think, you hope.
I think so, because when it comes to voting, for instance, sooner or later, you will find the person who's going to be promising you the earth as being something who's not a desirable person, but somebody who's a bit more down to earth and say, let's be friendly with China, then you might be persuaded towards making a judgment there. So I would say it's a very good thing that to begin with, that you have the interest in this sort of area, and hopefully it will make a few things a little bit more clearer, rather than getting a one-sided picture always.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't understand quite what was meant by the map with sort of roads traced through from China through to other countries.
Ride.
You mean literally roads or rails or something? Or
Yes, you see the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, it's patterned after the old Silk Road. Centuries ago, millennia ago, there was trade along the routes between China and Europe. It was called the Silk Road.
Yes.
And if you look at the Silk Road at that time, it transferred a lot of culture, ideas, goods even, and it made for, civilization to spread to various parts of the world. And based on that model, we have the New Silk Road, which is this BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. And those lines that you saw are actually a lot of rail lines and ports and roads, highways, and what have you, rail links and air links. It's essentially transport media, if you like. Yeah.
But they're not created by China, they just exist.
Some of them did exist in the old sort of sense, but each country has their own sort of system. So what China has done is, like even a poor country like, I think it was Croatia, Albania, they didn't have any money to expand their business. Each village was not connected to the other town. So China said, okay, we'll build you a highway to connect, your main city to some of the other hinterland. And you have to pay us so much. And the prime minister of that country said, when asked, aren't you taking a lot of loan? He said, look, we are taking a loan in order to make an investment so as to grow our businesses. If we don't make that investment, our grow businesses will be like this forever. Therefore, it's good to be able to have a highway which we use, where the technology is given to us, or rather the expertise has come in and built that highway for us. We'll pay them as we grow our business. So it's a model which I think is workable, unless one abuses it in some way or the other.
That's always a risk.
Yeah, there is always. But I think a lot of countries have found it to be affordable, because they look at it from the point of view of growing and developing as the infrastructure gets put in. Because infrastructure at the end of the day promotes trade, see? And the initial difficulties, which are lack of expertise and maybe a little bit of corruption, whatever, So the Chinese are experts at this, and they try and circumvent all the difficulties. In fact, for the HS2, they made a bid as well. They said the HS2 is about 100 billion for us to link, I think, London to Manchester or thereabouts. And Chinese said we can do it for 50 billion, but I don't think the government was keen to have them do it.
Yeah.
Yes, Sybil. You have to undo your audio.
Can you hear me? No?
Okay, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Oh, I want to say that was a brilliant lecture.
No,
I can't take it all in. It's too much for me. The thing I want to know is, what is China's attitude to climate change? They're the most polluted of all the countries.
That's right. In fact, that's one area which they agree with USA to do something about climate change. And I think they'll be very, they have already a program of phasing out this coal power and going in for new power. And they've got these nuclear and wind farms and solar panels and hydropower. They're going into it in a big way. In my last talk, I think I mentioned about the Three Gorges Dam. They produce 20 gigabytes of hydroelectricity from that dam. And they've got these world's largest solar farm. So they're in fact very conscious of the fact that they are growing very fast, and they don't have alternative power sufficiently as much as needed. Therefore, they're going in for coal power rather than inhibiting their development. But they're soon catching up because their plans are humongous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when the climate sort of thing takes place in UK, we'll see what exact schedule is from the point of view of bringing in these electric cars, for instance. China is the lead country in the world to bring in electric cars, which means, pollution already is going to be tackled at the user end level. So they are going very fast on all these fronts, and I'm very hopeful they will be able to deliver. And the record is such that it makes me confident that they can deliver. Yeah. Yeah, Drusilla.
Why is China friendly to the new Taliban government in Afghanistan? Why is China friendly to Afghanistan?
Yeah, what about it?
Why is China friendly to Afghanistan?
Well, China is friendly to Afghanistan simply because it feels that, it's a very hotbed area around that, Central Asia with, these, and in Uyghurs in Xinjiang. So they want that whole area to be economically coming up to the point where they don't start to become a nuisance. Because, when people are denied justice or economic well-being, they are very easily led by these, whoever it is, to go and fight. So they want to promote the economic well-being, and therefore Afghanistan is very much a part of the whole game plan, not only from the point of view of being part of the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, because that gives them access from Afghanistan and Pakistan to all of East, West Asia and to Africa. And not only that, you see, Talibans and all that have been against the US government fighting for 20 years. And of course, they consider Taliban who went over to Beijing, to see if they can get some help from China. And China says, yes, we will help. And they have promised an investment of 60 billion in Afghanistan. And another thing that is in favor of Afghan and China is that China needs a lot of lithium. You see, and Afghanistan is one of the biggest countries, is the biggest sources for lithium. The mines are so big. It's the second richest in the world, I think, apart from Bolivia. And China needs a lot of this lithium. So I think they're going to be wanting to satisfy their requirements and also develop Afghanistan so so that economically well off and not necessarily a trouble terrorist groups of any sort, or have people come in and make trouble of one sort or another. So economic well-being is a very good way of actually making sure that people are happy, rather than telling them, look, democracy is what you want, and democracy, as we have seen, can deliver in some cases only, but not in all, especially in the poor countries. It has been really sort of taken advantage of. The rich people come into power, they make their own laws suitable for them, especially the landlords, for instance. They don't pay agricultural income. So democracy is abused in a lot of these poor countries.
Would the Taliban approve of the murder of the Uyghur Muslims? Would the Taliban approve of China killing its Muslim population?
Yeah,
well, disapprove of that?
Yeah, one of the things that we need to be careful about is that the Chinese sort of position on that is, it says, is that because Xinjiang, that whole Uyghur region, is the poorest in China because it's a desert area. Most of the development of China has been on the east. And what they want to do is to bring in water from Tibet, build this 1,000 kilometer canal, and try and make the desert green, retrain the people so the factories can be built. Now with the bigger connectivity, through this Belt and Road, factories can be built there, so they need retrained people. So that's the narrative of China. But of course, it can be played so many other ways by saying, their identity has been taken away, this, that, or the other. So I wouldn't read and believe everything one reads in the media.
Well, it's interesting to have two sides to the story, isn't it?
Yes, because somewhere in between is the truth. As somebody told me, there's always three truths, your truth, my truth, and of course the truth itself. So right, are we all we lost Lily, I think. Yeah. So
okay.
Shall we?
Thank you very much. It's been an interesting romp through a few ideas.
Yeah, quite a fast romp there.
Yeah, I didn't catch some of it. The diagrams are too small on my little laptop to see clearly. So.
Well, you can always pick it up on the archive. In my archive.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the newsletter, they put it right at the bottom. The link. The archive.
All right. Yes.
And you can always see all the previous talks and play it at your leisure.
Yes.
And look at some of these slides as well in a bit more detail. All right.
No, it's very interesting just to get a different perspective on China and to understand it a bit more.
Yes. I think it's very important that we get the other side of the picture as well.
Yes. No, thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, I won't be giving my talk until the term opens again on 20th of September. And I'll probably do my class in the classroom itself with a technology giving us access over Zoom as well for people who are at home.
Good.
Yeah, let's hope that all that works.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for your contribution and thank you for listening patiently, and sorry about the rush. See you next term. All right.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not going to come. I'm only going to come on Zoom. Don't see me in person.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. 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 Okay, David. Take care. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.